Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
He is somebody that can take you to new heights. And I'm not just saying that because he's an accomplished pilot and has a big aviation background. He's an amazing coach. And his company is Coaching for Relevance. And if you work with a team, teamwork does make the dream work. That is a cliche, but it is the truth. How are you connecting with your team? What's the interpersonal relationships between everybody? And is it really working? Have you asked yourself that question? We're going to ask him that question and how to have a better relationship with your team. Randy Swaim is on the program. Randy, welcome back. How you doing?
Good to see you. It's always great to be here. Just an honor to be here.
It's great to have you back. I know we talked a little bit about team and collaboration last time, but we're going to center more time on connecting with that team.
Yeah. And the collaboration is key, because what I like to bring in for this particular show, I've mentioned to people that that I'm the founding fellowship partner with Institute for Organizational Neuroscience in Europe, and also for an NPN hub, which deals with neuroplasticity and neuroplasticity and stuff like that. And when you talk about connecting with your team, to what extent are you making assumptions about the situation? To what extent are you, and we kind of touched on this and just sort of hinted at this a little bit last week, to what point are you truly making assumptions about what your team's struggling with? And what do you see, and what do you need to do about it? And it really gets to this aspect of neuroplasticity. And what I'd like to do is just share a quote that is 150% true, bad math, but good truth in the comment. But it actually, I saw it posted and I actually shared it on my social media because of how true it was. But basically, the quote actually comes from Magnolia Learning Academy. And it's interesting, it has a neat picture, but basically here's what they said, and this is very true, but it brings out a key point with what we're talking about in your leadership. And it's simply this. Let me just quote it just real quick, and then I'll kind of make the comment and mention it because it's 100% true. He said, the quote: "A child's brain has the greatest neuroplasticity from birth to 4 years old. Of course, neuroplasticity is the ability for the brain to kind of rewire itself to learn and grow. And obviously, in the first 4 years of your life, your brain is doing that a lot. But it said from 5 years through adulthood, the brain can still do that, but it does it at a reduced rate. It's not as easy for the brain to do that. And so the point on this is, when you're talking about neuroplasticity, it's one thing, you don't have to just throw aside what people have believed in before, but you can't make assumptions. And the point that I make to people, and you've heard me say this a couple of times on the show, to what extent are you just putting it in your cerebellum and falling back to rote academic things? What are you not seeing? Because your brain is not wired to see it. What are you assuming? When you look at your team and you're trying to collaborate, what about the situation do you not see or understand about the struggle that your team is having, or individuals on your team is having? And how do you come alongside them and really make them feel like they can get through this and they're not in this alone, kind of thing. And when you think about it, the point that I just want to leave with people today for sure is this aspect that when you're talking about neuroplasticity, when you're in businesses or teams, when you're over 5 years old, kind of thing, that aspect is a very deliberate action. It's not something that you just set aside and say, well, this will grow and this will happen. No, it's very direct. And I think I shared with the show some time ago. I don't remember whether it may have been with KC or whatever, but I mentioned that one of the pilots that I was training one time came in from a break, and he said, I may have to hire you outside of here. And I said, well, what about, kind of thing. And he said, I got to stop smoking, kind of thing. And I said, well, that's a behavior. That is something we could work on. But what I told him was, I said, tell me about where you get the strongest sense of wanting that cigarette. And he said exactly what I thought he would say. And he said, well, when I'm at home watching TV and nothing else is going on. And I said, okay, so that's your point of attack, right? Of this. And he said, yeah. And I said, what is it going to take for you to be at peace at the point of attack? Because I said your brain can rewire itself, but particularly in adults, that could take 4 to 6 weeks for it to kind of move some nerves and create some junctions in the nerves to rewire itself. And I said, after 4 to 6 weeks, maybe you'll probably find it easier to do that. But what is it going to take for you to be at peace in the midst of the battle until that happens? And that part of it is deliberate, and for all of us. And you know what? We've all been through something in our life where we had to do that. And it's one thing to think about it from the standpoint of this neuroplasticity aspect of it. And, when you're in a challenging situation, when you're trying to collaborate with your team, how are you going to get a real sense of that, and how you can build that in your team? And by the way, not just the individuals in your team, how can you build it in such a way that it becomes part of your team so that your team members do that with each other, even when you're not there? And so, when you talk about collaboration, that's just sort of a dovetail on that, which is so key. But this aspect of neuroplasticity and understanding how the brain works and how it might be getting in the way, or whether it's really drawing a picture for, yeah, we can do that, kind of thing. That's key, particularly in an unpredictable environment. And so it is very interesting when you talk about how that even dovetails into collaboration. A collaboration is not just telling somebody to do something and you better trust me because I'm all this. That's not true trust. Building that aspect of that part of the brain and kind of how that's working and all that, that's a central part of it. And like this said correctly so at Magnolia Learning Academy, bottom line is when you're over 5 years old, which let's face it, most of us are, kind of thing, that is more deliberate than most people realize. If you get a sense for somebody in your team or you are simply going back to some superficial academic comfort zone back in your cerebellum, guess what? You're probably missing the real success factor in whatever you're dealing with. And so it's one aspect about it when you talk about how the brain works and how that gets involved in either in a way that holds you back or in a way where it takes you to radical success. That's the vision of it, because the brain can do either one.
How do you get your brain to do that? What do you want it to?
You know what? Well, you know what? A good example of this for many people is just, what do you, as an example, how do you overcome certain behaviors? For instance, if somebody becomes an alcoholic, how do they overcome that? If somebody was a drug addict at some point, how do they overcome that? If I'm somebody who reacts militantly to everything that just doesn't go my way, how do I overcome that? Well, the first thing, and this is kind of what I shared with that pilot who wanted to stop smoking, kind of thing. The first thing I asked is, what the point of attack really look like when that temptation or that draw is the strongest? And that could just be in when you're going back to, and that's all. At what point are you aware that that's happening? When does that typically happen? It may be at a time when I don't know where to go from here. Okay, understand that maybe, but to draw a picture for when that is becoming the strongest part of that battle. And you know what? Once you have some clarity on when that typically is, what are you going to do? And before your brain starts to rewire itself so that you're much more comfortable in this new direction, what do you need to do to shift that? And how are you going to be at peace in the midst of that battle to where instead of having to fight it, you sit there and go, I get a sense, but you know what? So be it. No big deal. I'm going this way. I don't need to do that anymore. Or you see somebody on your team that is making that assumption or something. And when you're talking to your team, it's huge to realize it's just about you telling them stuff. This is about how do you need to lead them? Because remember, leading, a big aspect of leadership is modeling something. And you know what? You're going to model that for your team. And how are you going to help them get a sense of that in their experience with each other and as the team, so that they can start seeing, oh yeah, you know what? I sense that, but you know what? No, we'll keep going forward or whatever. And so this aspect of neuroplasticity and kind of how the brain wires itself, the first thing is to understand it with clarity on what that real point of attack looks like, that makes you go back to the comfort zone or makes you go back to just what you want it to be. You'd be surprised at how many pilot instructors, even just around the industry, and people too, not just instructors, not just pilots, but just people. You'd be surprised at how many times I've heard somebody say, well, it should have been like this. No, that scenario was not like that. You wanted it to be that way because that's what you're, but so getting clarity on that point of attack and then looking at it from the standpoint, okay, then how am I going to increase my awareness of when that is there? And what am I really going to do? How am I going to be aware of thinking a little bit differently and seeing what I didn't see before, so that I can have my brain start to rewire itself a little bit, not to throw everything that I've ever believed in the trash, but to see what's not there, to see that real successful choice that may be right in the middle of the two, borders of the decision, as opposed to saying this or that. In our world today, so many people, it's all like, well, it's just this, not that. Well, you know what? There's a whole spectrum sometimes of choices in the middle of that. And at what point is it the right choice? And so when you think about this aspect of the brain and how it, uses the neuroplasticity, and so often in teamwork and stuff, how that gets in the way sometimes. As a leader, what do you need for your team? And make it so that they see the benefit of it and they go, wow, yeah, how did you do that? I want to do that. And you didn't have to tell them what to do. They saw the benefit and they experienced the benefit, the collaboration aspect of it. So this is all sort of part of that, but those are the two big things to answer your question. The first one is to gain real clarity on when that is coming on the scene. How do you know? What would you have done in the past? And what's it going to take for you to see what's there now, but wasn't there in this academic world, situation kind of thing? And what's it going to take for you to clarify the real success that reaches radical results, not just because you talk through it, but because you see it and you choose it, and that takes your team beyond where you would have ever expected. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of times in my life journey I could have just walked away from it and given up. But you know what? The fact that I didn't, I got to tell you, my journey has not always been perfect. But I tell you, none of us have. But I tell you what, it's gone way further than I would have ever imagined, because I didn't let that just, can't do that. Can do that kind of thing, And so that's the real value of it. Understanding how your brain sometimes gets in the way if all you're doing is going back to what you're used to in the comfort zone, as opposed to what's that battle look like and what's that real solution going forward. What do I need to do about it? And what do I need to kind of lead in my team? And that doesn't mean telling them what to do, but leading the way so that they want to follow it. And that's an aspect of leadership that a lot of people don't know. It's not about me being in the headquarters telling them what to do. There's times where I got to go out on the battlefield and stand in front of them and say, y'all follow me, let's go, and lead the way. And when you're talking about this aspect, this is a key picture of this. But aspect of leadership, when you look at this aspect of the brain and neuroplasticity and neuroscience and decision making and really reaching radical results, it's a key part. And guess what? Like I said, if your team feels that, going to feel when they feel telling you something that they're kind of struggling with on something, and you say, you know what, I get that. You know what, I've struggled with that too. Really? How'd you get past it? Oh, this is what I did. What would you do in your experience, kind of thing? And I had one guy that was a coaching person that I was coaching. This was, holy cow, this was probably 13 years ago, but he, as we were walking out to the car, he was telling me something that was embarrassing to him, that was a struggle that was going, and it blew his mind in a positive way. And it revolutionized his life, when all I did is I looked at him and I said, well, I understand that, because you know what, there was a time in my life where that was a struggle for me as well. And he just went like this. He just went, really? I went, yep, I understand what you're saying. I totally do. And that was, but when you think about this aspect of the brain, how it gets in the way, how it doesn't, how it can lead you to radical success, break through the, go to the victory, kind of thing, and reach success, that other people are going to come up to you and go, how'd you do that? That's amazing, kind of thing, to you and your team. It's this aspect of the brain and how it works, how it gets in the way, that is huge. And to have an understanding of this aspect of what's that battle look like, okay? How's your clarity when that comes on scene for you and your team?
But when you are,
and then what are you going to do about it?
In that situation, let's say whatever it may be, you're leading a team, something, and maybe it makes you go in a different direction instead of focusing on your team. Let's say you have anxiety, and you kind of keep it to yourself. Situation comes up, now you're stressed out, and you really need to be a focused leader. You want to rewire your brain, neuroplasticity, which we talked about. When those moments come up, is it reasonable to think of something else? Like, I thought you had said that, to think of another situation that's going to make you feel better until you eventually form the habit or the rewiring of your brain to perform the way you want to.
And that is something that is one option, because guess what? In those weeks where your brain is rewiring it, how are you going to minimize the temptation, if you want to call it that, for that negative battle kind of thing? And I don't mean this is like drugs and all that. I mean anything in your team at work. It could be something that, boy, I'd say, well, we just don't want to go there. That's just a pain in the neck, that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, what's it going to take? And guess what? With different people on your team, each individual is a little bit different. So each person may have a slightly different way that, you know what, when I see that battle coming on board, okay, here's what I'm going to do. And this is aligned with our team, but it makes it so that it doesn't, cause me to be submitted to that problem and that battle. And you know what, at some point, you go by a few weeks and all of a sudden you don't think about that particular thing as much anymore. Why? Because your brain has seen things that maybe you didn't see before, perhaps has helped you take the courage to step forward in the midst of the battle and walk forward. And you, the leader, maybe they got a benefit when you stepped out in front of them in the midst of this battle or whatever and said, you know what, I understand what all you were feeling. Let's walk forward in this. Let's go. Follow me. And you take a couple of steps forward and they say, yeah. And they pick up their weapons and they walk with you, kind of thing. And that's a good picture from military of real leadership. And there is an aspect about that when you're talking about leading your team in a workplace. because those things do come up periodically. And if you understand the brain, you know, if all you're doing is going back to rote superficial academics or rote superficial comfort zones, you're not getting the job done. Because guess what? A lot of scenarios are not purely academic. There are some factors that may be involved that I didn't assume, that I assumed that are not there, or that were not part of my academic picture, but they're there now. And, you know, so you never want to get into that habit of saying, well, it should have been like this. No, because guess what? The real world, very often it isn't. And can your team handle that? Are you leading them in such a way that they can handle that? And that's just a huge picture when you look at this neuroplasticity and the aspect of the brain, and how leaders need to be basically aware of that and how you're going to really interact with that with your team.
I love what you said before, and it's rhetorical, it's classic, but we always forget about it. And that's leading by example, where you showed Randy a situation where the team just realizes that, yeah, oh, that's the way it is. We'll follow along and do that. It's not that his leader was saying, do this, you need to do it this way. It just organically happened. They saw how it's going to be done and they just follow by example.
Yep. And you know what? That's also how they grow and learn.
Yeah.
From the standpoint of, you know, sometimes they look at this challenge and they don't realize this is dangerous, or, you know, not physically, but boy, I don't know if I want to do this or not. And they see you stepping forward. And as they have their sights on you, as they're following you, a few days later or something, they look back and they go, we made it through that. Wow. How'd we do that? You know, kind of thing. And the leader led them. So yeah, there's this aspect in true leadership where it's not just about you telling them, it's about you modeling. And this is a key aspect of this modeling of, you know, and it's amazing when somebody says something about a struggle that they have or whatever, and you go, you know what, I understand that totally, because you know what, I've had a struggle like that myself, and I know that, and I know what you're going through. But you know what, I got through it. You can get through it too. And so all of that comes into play with that, and it really is a good picture of this aspect of true leadership is about modeling as much as it is anything. And
Yeah,
it's key.
And it's kind of, we're just about out of time, but I just read this for kids. One of the best things nowadays you can say to your kid, and it does, you know, we don't have to define the age, but you'll get the idea, is to say, being a student or a teen or a kid nowadays is difficult, and I know that it's a challenge for you. Just to show that you understand what they're going through, just what you said, and now take that and just, you know, move that to adults. It's kind of the same thing. Some empathy.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah. It's for rising stars and anybody on your team. No two ways about it. It is cute because I'll tell you, a lot happens positive in somebody's heart and spirit and an example in who they are when they realize that their boss, their leader, and all that truly understands what I'm experiencing. You know, that makes a huge difference in collaborating with your people. You know, that's a key aspect of it.
Good stuff today. We are out of time. Coaching.com is your website, and this is what you do. The principles, the showing somebody the leadership skills, you do it on a regular basis in terms of your line of work. Well, one of your lines of work in terms of airplane pilot and teacher.
It's not part of my lines of work, but yeah, but you're right. You're right.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. You have the synergy there going on because you're teaching others how to lead in both capacities as a coach, but also, you know, in a pilot situation where you're teaching there. Randy, always great having you on. A breath of fresh air that a lot of us don't realize. You're the camera angle that we don't see. You know, it's the other one that's never around.
Well, I'm humbled with that. You gotta think. I very much, like I said, it's been an honor to be on the show for a long time, and it's certainly an honor to work with you, Stephen. And I look forward to doing it more. So, like I said, it's very honored to just be a very small part.
You too, Randy. And I appreciate you, and look forward next time we talk.
Sounds good. Well, listen, we'll look forward to it.
Yep. Looking forward to it. And the website, once again, coachingforrelevance.com.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.